What would you do if you were wrongfully accused of something? Right there in front of a crowd, simply because of how you look. Imagine the weight of that moment. Malik, a well-dressed black teenager, faces this harsh and uncomfortable reality when a biased security guard falsely accuses him of shoplifting at a high-end mall. Tensions soar as the truth begins to unfold, and we're left questioning. How often do our assumptions push us to act unfairly? And perhaps more crucially, what happens when those in power are forced to confront their own biases? Before we dive into this heart-wrenching story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching or listening from today. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The shopping mall in Richmond, Virginia, was alive with activity. Its long corridors hummed with the sounds of shoppers, each lost in their own world, weaving between luxury stores. The gleaming windows reflected high-end fashion, designer bags, and the fleeting images of people hurrying past. But something felt off this evening. Ethan, the mall's night security guard, had been here for 2 years, yet tonight, there was an unsettled energy in the air that he couldn't quite shake. His radio crackled to life, and Sarah, his shift partner, checked in, her voice calm but familiar. "All good on your end?" "Yeah, so far so good," Ethan replied, scanning the crowd. But something caught his eye. A group of teenagers near the entrance of Bon Ami, one of the more upscale stores. 4 of them, laughing and talking loudly. Typical Friday night stuff. But among them was Malik, standing out in his tailored navy blue jacket, fitted jeans, and sleek sneakers. Not like the others, who looked more casual, even worn. Ethan's eyes locked on Malik. A spark of suspicion flared. There was no real reason for it. Just an instinct. Something about the group, loitering, doing nothing, seemed off. Maybe they were waiting for trouble to find them? His radio buzzed again. "You see something?" Sarah's voice had an edge now. She knew when something was making Ethan uneasy. Ethan adjusted his stance, his eyes narrowing. "Just checking something out," he muttered, already moving towards the group. As he approached, Malik glanced up from his phone, but quickly returned to his screen, oblivious to the scrutiny. Ethan's footsteps slowed as he got closer. His gaze flicked between the group, his suspicion growing. He cleared his throat and addressed them with a voice that was anything but friendly. "Hey, what are you all doing here?" One of the boys, wearing a backwards cap, shot him an indifferent look. "Just hanging out, man. We're not doing anything wrong." Ethan's eyes fell on Malik again, the sharpest dressed of them all. The blood rushed to his head. "You," he said, pointing directly at Malik. "What are you doing?" "Been watching you stand here for a while." Malik raised his eyes slowly, calm but confused. "Waiting for my friends," he answered. "Why?" Ethan's face hardened, his voice dripping with accusation. "Why? Because you don't look like you're waiting for anything. I want to know if you've been inside the store." He pointed at Bon Ami. Malik blinked in disbelief. "What? No, I haven't. I've just been standing here." The laughter from Malik's friends died instantly. Their voices went quiet, and the energy shifted. The tension was palpable. Sarah, watching from a distance, felt her stomach tighten. She'd seen Ethan act like this before, singling someone out without cause. But this was different. This time, she could see the fear in Malik's face, the shift in his posture. "You think I'm shoplifting?" Malik's voice, once calm, now held an edge of incredulity. His eyes darted from Ethan to the store. "Why are you singling me out?" Ethan took a step closer, his face flushed with authority. "You tell me. Why don't you empty your pockets?" The demand hung in the air like a thick, suffocating fog. The carefree buzz of the mall was gone. The crowd, once oblivious, began to murmur. Malik's friends shifted nervously, exchanging glances. Everyone was watching now. Malik stood taller, his posture firm. "No, I didn't steal anything. I'm not emptying my pockets. I haven't done anything wrong." Ethan's frustration mounted. His voice grew louder, the anger clear. "Empty your pockets." A woman from the crowd spoke up, her voice laced with concern. "What's going on here?" The whispers grew louder, and Sarah's heart raced. This was wrong. She knew it. Ethan was on a power trip. She clenched her fists. She couldn't stay silent any longer. Malik took a deep breath, his voice tight with tension. "Listen, man, I'm just here to meet up with my friends. I don't want any trouble." He reached for his phone, trying to defuse the situation. If you keep this up, we're going to have a problem. A smirk flickered across Ethan's lips. Oh, we already have one. Suddenly, without warning, Ethan lunged forward, grabbing Malik's arm. Gasps rippled through the crowd as phones were pulled out to record the scene. Let go of me, Malik shouted, his voice sharp, no longer calm. You have no right. Ethan tightened his grip, and the situation spiraled. The crowd grew, people murmuring, cameras flashing. Sarah's pulse pounded in her chest. She couldn't watch this unfold any longer. Stepping forward, she called out, Ethan, that's enough. Ethan turned, surprise flashing in his eyes. What? You think he's innocent? Sarah swallowed hard, her voice firm, unwavering. I do. You're going too far. For a moment, Ethan stood frozen, caught between his pride and the reality of what he had just done. Finally, his grip loosened and Malik straightened his jacket, his voice steady but cold. You just made a big mistake. Ethan's face turned red with frustration. What? He stammered, suddenly vulnerable. Malik's voice rang out with authority. My name is Malik Dawson. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. My father owns this mall. And when he hears about this, you'll be out of a job. The shock hit Ethan like a freight train. His hands dropped to his sides, and his eyes widened. What did you say? Malik stood tall, his voice steady. You heard me. Now call your manager. I want to talk to them. Right. Now. Sarah stepped forward, her voice soothing yet firm. I'll call them, Malik. I'm so sorry this happened. Let's get this sorted. As Malik turned away, following Sarah toward a resolution, Ethan stood alone, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. In the days that followed, the mall's management launched a full investigation into Ethan's conduct. The video of the incident had gone viral, and outrage spread like wildfire. Ethan was suspended, pending the investigation, but the damage was done. The footage exposed something much deeper, something that couldn't be ignored any longer. Sarah became a key witness in the investigation, speaking out against Ethan's actions. It wasn't easy for her. She'd worked with him for years, but what he had done was wrong, and she couldn't stay silent. In the end, justice prevailed. Ethan lost his job, and the mall introduced new training programs to eliminate racial profiling, ensuring everyone would be treated with respect. Malik didn't just want to see Ethan punished. He wanted to ensure something good came from this. And thanks to his persistence, change finally began to happen. Months later, the mall was quieter. The crowds had thinned, but the echoes of that day still lingered in the air. For Malik, Sarah, and everyone who had witnessed it, one thing was clear. Justice had been done. And as for Ethan, he sat at home, watching the news, his face drawn with frustration. His suspension was just the beginning. The mall's leadership couldn't risk the PR disaster Ethan's actions had caused. His behavior had ignited a firestorm, one that spread far beyond Richmond. News channels, online forums, and social media were flooded with posts condemning his actions. People he'd never met were tearing apart his life, turning him into a villain. The weight of it was unbearable. Ethan switched off the TV, the silence in the room now deafening. His breath echoed as he sat motionless, wondering, what had I been thinking? At the time, it had felt like instinct, like he was just doing his job, right? But now, replaying the scene in his mind, he saw it all too clearly. Malik hadn't done anything wrong, yet Ethan had treated him like a criminal from the moment he saw him. He knew what was coming next. The investigation was nearing its end. It wouldn't be long before he was officially fired. And beyond that, Malik. He wasn't just any teenager. No, Malik had power, connections, things Ethan could never dream of. And what did Ethan have? Nothing. He was finished. He'd probably never work in security again. Ethan sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. The thoughts of Sarah gnawing at him. She had been there the whole time, watching the chaos unfold. And in the end, she turned on him. Had she been right? Had she seen things more clearly than he had? Maybe. But it still stung. It felt like betrayal. Meanwhile, Malik sat in his father's office at home, the walls surrounding him covered in awards and framed articles, celebrating his father's success. Malik had grown up in a world of wealth and privilege, but none of it had shielded him from that moment at the mall. Not the clothes. Not the money. Not even his father's status. None of it had protected him from being humiliated. He stared at his phone, scrolling through the flood of texts and DMs that had flooded in since the video went viral. Everyone had something to say. Friends, classmates, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. Some messages were supportive, but others were filled with anger and confusion. Why hadn't you fought back? Why didn't you do more in the moment? Malik tossed his phone aside. It wasn't that simple. He'd tried to stay calm, tried to keep the situation from escalating, but the humiliation lingered. He could still feel Ethan's hand gripping his arm. He could still hear the stares of the crowd, judging him before they even knew the full story. Just then his father entered the room. His presence was commanding as always. Malik, we need to talk. Malik straightened in his chair. He knew his father had spent the day in meetings with the mall's management team, trying to figure out how to spin the situation. His father valued reputation above all else, and this incident had thrown their family into the spotlight in a way they never wanted. I just got off the phone with the board, his father said, sitting across from him. They're taking this very seriously. The guard, Ethan, he'll be fired. And they're going to review all their security practices moving forward. Malik nodded, though he wasn't sure how he felt about it. Good. But it's not just about firing him, Dad. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. To anyone. His father's expression softened slightly. I know. We're working on that. But Malik, you have to understand something. In situations like this, people get caught up in the moment. They make mistakes, sometimes big ones. That's what happened here. Malik frowned, his voice firm. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. His father met his gaze, nodding slowly. You're right. It was a choice. And that's why we're not letting this slide. There was a pause. The weight of the conversation hung between them. Malik could see his father trying to keep it professional, handling it like any other business crisis. But for Malik, this wasn't just business. It was personal. I want to be involved in the changes, Malik said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. His father raised an eyebrow. Involved how? I don't know yet, Malik admitted. But I want to make sure the policies they put in place actually do something. That they stop this from happening again. Not just to me, but to anyone. His father paused, considering him. Then with a nod he said, all right. We can make that happen. The next day, Sarah sat in the security office, staring at her reflection in the blank computer screen. The investigation was over, but the guilt still gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she should have done more. She had hesitated, letting Ethan take control for too long before stepping in. Now, with the fallout everywhere, she couldn't help but wonder, could I have prevented this? When she had first started as a security guard, it wasn't about power or control. She had genuinely wanted to help, to protect people. But over time, she had seen how easy it was to slip into routine, to let biases slip in without realizing it. She sighed, glancing at the empty desk where Ethan used to sit. He hadn't been back to the mall since the incident, and from what she heard, he wouldn't be returning. Sarah couldn't say she was sorry about that. What Ethan had done was wrong, plain and simple. But still the situation weighed on her. How had it all spiraled out of control so quickly? A knock on the door broke her thoughts. She turned to see Malik standing there, hands tucked into his pockets. He looked calm, but there was a weight in his expression that hadn't been there before. Hey, he said, stepping inside. You got a minute? Sarah nodded. Of course. Come on in. Malik took a seat across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was the first time they had spoken since the incident. Sarah had expected anger, but Malik didn't seem angry. He just seemed tired. I just wanted to say thanks, Malik said finally, his voice quiet. For speaking up. I know it couldn't have been easy. Sarah shook her head. No, it wasn't. But it was the right thing to do. And I'm sorry I didn't do it sooner. Malik nodded, his eyes downcast for a moment. It's crazy how things can get out of hand so fast. I never thought something like that would happen to me. But now, I don't know. I'm looking at things differently. Sarah understood. She too had been looking at things differently. The whole situation had opened her eyes to the subtle ways that bias could creep into her work, even when she wasn't aware of it. I think a lot of people are, she said softly. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it means something will actually change. Malik smiled faintly. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. The days following the incident turned into weeks, and Malik's life hadn't quite returned to normal. Despite keeping a low profile, the video of his encounter with Ethan continued to circulate. There were interviews, calls from advocacy groups, and even a few requests from local news outlets. His father had done his best to shield him from the media storm, but it wasn't easy. At school, people treated him differently. Some saw him as a hero, standing up to injustice, while others gave him looks of pity, as though he had been permanently scarred by the experience. Malik wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, he was glad the incident had sparked a broader conversation about racial profiling. But on the other, he just wanted to move on, to get back to his life. Yet deep down he knew that things had changed for good. One afternoon, Malik sat at a quiet cafe with his best friend Ryan. The place was nearly empty, just a few patrons scattered around sipping their coffees. Ryan had been Malik's closest friend for years, but now, things felt different. For years, Malik and Ryan had shared countless moments, but none could have prepared them for the whirlwind that had taken over Malik's life. As Ryan slowly stirred his drink, his eyes scanning the surface of his coffee, his voice broke the silence, full of disbelief. Man, it's wild how everything just blew up. One minute we're hanging out at the mall, and the next. His voice trailed off as he looked at Malik, trying to process it all. Yeah, Malik murmured, his gaze fixed on the window. It's still hard to wrap my head around. I never thought something like this could happen to me. You know? Ryan nodded knowingly. No one ever does. But you handled it like a champ. I don't know how you stayed so calm. Malik shrugged, his expression distant. I don't know either. I just knew that if I lost it, things would have gotten worse, especially with Ethan. He wasn't looking to listen. Ryan's face darkened. He was just looking for a reason to start something. We all saw it. Malik sighed deeply, nodding. Yeah, but at least something good is coming out of it. My dad's been talking with the mall management about real changes, new training, new policies, stuff that might actually make a difference. Ryan leaned forward, his posture shifting. That's awesome. Maybe it'll stop things like that from happening to other people. Maybe, Malik said, his voice thoughtful, tinged with uncertainty. There was a quiet hesitation in his tone, a hint of doubt about the possibility of true change. He wanted to believe he really did, but he knew that deeply ingrained biases didn't just disappear overnight. Ryan raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. You ever think about what you're going to do next? With everything that's happened? Malik paused, a small smile tugging at his lips. Funny you mention that. I've been thinking about getting more involved. Not just with the mall, but with other stuff, community programs, maybe even talking to schools about what happened. Ryan's eyes widened. That's huge, man. You'd be great at that. Malik chuckled softly. I don't know about great, but I feel like I need to do something. After everything that happened, I can't just sit back and pretend it didn't matter. People need to hear these stories. They need to understand. Ryan nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious. And for a while, they sat in silence, the weight of the conversation hanging between them. Malik wasn't sure where his path would lead, but one thing was certain. He couldn't go back to the way things were before. At the mall, changes were already underway. Ethan had been officially terminated, and the mall had rolled out new diversity and bias training for all employees. It wasn't just lip service. Management had brought in outside experts to reshape the way security and staff approached their jobs. The incident with Malik had been a wake-up call, and they couldn't afford to ignore it. Sarah had attended the first of the training sessions. She sat quietly in the back, listening as the instructor spoke about the dangers of unconscious bias. It was uncomfortable, hearing examples that hit a little too close to home. But Sarah knew it was necessary. She couldn't pretend she hadn't been part of the problem. Even though she hadn't been as aggressive as Ethan, her hesitation had almost cost someone their dignity. After the session, Sarah lingered in the hallway, her mind swirling. She had spent years working in security, but for the first time, she was questioning everything. What other assumptions had she made over the years? How many times had she let biases guide her actions without even realizing it? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Malik. "Hey Sarah, I'm heading to the mall tomorrow. Thought we could talk if you're free." Sarah hesitated for a moment, the weight of the situation still heavy on her chest, before replying, "Yeah, I'll be there. Let's talk." The next day, Malik arrived at the mall, his steps measured, a strange sense of familiarity mixed with discomfort. It felt different now. This place that had once been a part of his everyday life. His family had helped it grow into the bustling hub it was today. But now, it felt like a constant reminder of everything that had happened. He met Sarah near the security office, the place where their paths had first crossed. She was waiting for him, looking a little nervous but determined. Malik could tell that the incident had affected her, too, in ways she probably hadn't expected. "Hey," Sarah greeted him, offering a small hesitant smile. "Thanks for meeting me." Malik nodded. "No problem." They stood there for a moment, the weight of their shared experience hanging between them. Finally Sarah spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I wanted to apologize again for what happened. I should have stepped in sooner. I saw what was going on, but I froze. I let Ethan take it too far." Malik listened, his expression thoughtful. He appreciated her honesty. It wasn't easy to admit when you'd made a mistake, especially one that had such a lasting impact. "I get it," Malik said, his voice calm. "It's not easy to speak up, especially when it's someone you work with. But I'm glad you did in the end." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. "Thanks. And I'm glad you're okay. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and it's made me realize how much more I need to learn. This whole situation, it's opened my eyes." Malik smiled faintly. "It's opened a lot of people's eyes, I think." They talked for a while longer, exchanging thoughts about the changes happening at the mall and the broader conversation about racial profiling and discrimination. Malik shared his plans to get more involved in the community, and Sarah offered her support, promising to stay in touch and help however she could. As they parted ways, Malik felt a sense of closure, though he knew the journey wasn't over. There was still work to be done, not just at the mall, but in the community and within himself. Yet for the first time since the incident, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, something good could come out of all this. Months later, the Richmond Mall was a different place. New policies had been implemented, and the security team had undergone comprehensive training. The management made it a priority to create a safer, more inclusive environment for all shoppers, ensuring that incidents like the one with Malik would never happen again. Malik had become an advocate for change, speaking at schools and community centers about his experience and the importance of standing up against prejudice. His story had inspired others to share their own experiences, sparking conversations that had long been overdue. Sarah continued working at the mall, but her perspective had shifted. She was more aware now, more thoughtful in her interactions with others. She had learned that being a good security guard wasn't just about enforcing rules. It was about protecting people. All people. With fairness and respect. As for Ethan, he had disappeared from public view. The last Malik had heard, Ethan had moved out of Richmond, unable to find work after the incident. Malik didn't take pleasure in Ethan's downfall, but he knew actions had consequences. And while Ethan's career had come to an abrupt end, Malik's journey was just beginning. In the end, justice had been served, not just for Malik, but for everyone who had ever been unfairly judged because of the color of their skin. And though the road ahead was long, Malik was ready to walk it, knowing that change was possible, and that the ties that bind us are stronger than the forces that seek to divide.